Good morning, good morning, good morning, 11:11. Perfect day, beautiful day here in Florida. The temperature is just perfect. It's about maybe 80 degrees or something, and it's wonderful. We've got lots and lots of breezes. So, okay, this is our I think in America you call it Veterans Day. Uh, in England, I guess we call it Remembrance Day. I'm sure all over the world people have got their name for it, but basically it all means the same thing. So before we begin, I would like to first of all say good morning to Grey Eagle, who is at my side, a true warrior. Um, um, I would like to say good morning to Chris. Good morning, Chris. And I would also like to say good morning to all of you. Um, as a warrior, I'm going to ask you, Chris, is there anybody there? do we actually have anybody joining us this morning?
They're just now coming on, Rosemary. I think because of that little glitch we had this morning, maybe it's given a different place for them to log in. So I think they're trying to find us.
Okay, all right. So what shall we talk about before everybody joins in? We have to wait for people to join in. Um, I think what we're going to do this morning is, you know, on every November 11th, I remember my daddy, who has just joined us also, and my brother. We've got a whole lot of people coming in here. Didn't expect that. Don't know who that is. Um, I'm seeing some new people. I don't even know who they are. Okay. So yes, I mean, I was thinking last night, and then this morning I was sort of sitting on the edge of the bed thinking about the day and thinking about the fact that, all of us who have had any servicemen in any war, whatever the war, um, we this is the day when we perhaps remember their dedication to their country. We remember what the wars were about, which was freedom of speech. We just had an election, and boy, oh boy, was there ever a moment in our recent history where we can show freedom of speech, which is what our servicemen, our loved ones, our fathers, brothers, sons, daughters, sisters, all of those who have served their country, we have to thank them for fighting for us and giving us the freedom of speech that we just experienced just a few days ago. So this is that day that we remember. But as I was remembering, and of course remembering my father, certain memories came up. So I'm going to invite those of you who join us, if you have a memory of a hero. um, Probably those heroes wouldn't even call themselves heroes, but you know what I mean. If you have a memory of someone in your family who went to fight on behalf of all of us, who thank God they did, because we would be definitely a dictatorship now if they hadn't done that. But if you have a memory, and it doesn't have to be a memory of the war, it doesn't have to be a memory of them returning from the war. It just can be a memory of that one person who went to war or helped the war effort in some way. And if you have a memory of that person, I'm going to invite you to share that story with us, because this morning is all about sharing and being with our loved ones. I can remember, in England, I'm sure yesterday being Sunday, I'm sure they had a huge parade in London for all of the soldiers and all of those people who have worn a uniform in service of their country. So if you have a story, let's have it. So, Chris, people coming in now, or are we still biding time?
Uh, we have a little group of people who are in on, I believe it's mostly YouTube. Um, Randy's in saying happy 11/11, Rosemary,
Right.
but mostly no one is typing into the chat.
Oh, so maybe we shouldn't have done this then. What do you all think? Maybe that'll get people typing into the chat room. Should we have done this at all, or not? As I was thinking about my father this morning, and of course, you know, you go back in time, you think of your childhood and so on. Um, I, I had these memories that came to me. Now, just to let you all know, seeing there's hardly anybody there, so it's just us, a little private group of people. It feels quite intimate to me. I like it. But I was thinking this morning about my childhood, and my childhood was not great. It wasn't uh, terrible, but it wasn't certainly wasn't great. And you know, I was thinking about the very first time that I ever had an interaction with my father that you could say was loving. I only remember in all of the years, and I was in well into my teens. I was 17, 18, I think, when I left home. I can only ever remember 3 times when I sat on my father's knee. Um, I do not, and I then of course I thought I have not one single memory of ever sitting on my mother's knee. I have not one single memory of ever being hugged by my mother either, uh, and I'm pretty sure it didn't happen. Um, but talking of soldiers, talking about heroes, growing up, my sisters and I, my younger sister and I particularly, we were really scared of our dad, and we were as much scared of him because of the way he was as what our mother would tell us and warn us about him. But to this country of mine, to Great Britain, and to the war and all of the things that happened during the Second World War, my father was an absolute hero. And you just simply can't take it away from him. And luckily for me, as I got older and as he got older, we formed a really, really good relationship, despite all of the stuff that happened in my childhood. So you know, so as I've said, I can remember 3 vivid moments in my entire childhood where my father stepped up as a father, if you like. And I can also remember lots of moments when he would impart to me words of wisdom, which were not necessarily, you know, great, but he tried to, he tried in his way from time to time, giving his wisdom. He tried to protect me. And when we see our loved ones going off to war, and even now we're seeing our loved ones, we're seeing those soldiers who are being sent into countries that, I mean, don't really have anything to do with us. But we see them being sent into war zones, and they go, I mean, whether they go willingly or not, I'm not sure. But when you sign up for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, when you sign up as a nurse in the Army or whatever it is you're doing, when you sign up for these things, you know absolutely that the chances of you being sent into a war zone are high. You know that. And how brave, how amazing, how incredible. And even when, in my country, soldiers were conscripted. I think when you were 18, you got conscripted into the army, which means you had no choice. You went, I think, for 3 years, so 18 to 21. You had to do your duty. It was called. You had to do your duty to your king or queen and your country. So kids were conscripted in. It was all male at that time. There were not such things as women soldiers, but now look at what we have now. And these brave, brave, amazing people, thank goodness that we have them there for us, and that they fight on our behalf. It's just an amazing, amazing thing. So, Chris, do we have any more people, or are we still an intimate little group?
Oh,
Probably.
yes. Yes, more people have logged on, Rosemary. Randy says, I thankfully don't know anyone who died in a war. My father is 98 and he is a Holocaust survivor. My
Right.
daughter is writing his memoir in her college writing class.
Wow. That must be an amazing thing. I mean, wow. I mean, when you think back, there are actually people who say that people are saying that the Holocaust never happened. I mean, get real, people. Of course, it happened. There are too many stories. There's too much evidence. You can go into the prison camps and see what's going on there. I mean, when you think about the amazing, the fact that your dad is 90 something and survived the Holocaust, actually survived, what it must do to your mind, what it must do to your heart, what it must do to your soul, to your spirit, to to actually go through those awful, awful times. And, we forget as people, we forget, which is why November 11th is such a good day to remember. We forget the horrors of war. And especially at the moment, there are wars going on all over the world, but because they actually don't touch us, except those people whose sons and daughters are involved in the war. And I truly mean, God help you all, because that must be a dreadful thing to have to live through or to live with. But when we think of the horrors and what could have happened had we not had our troops, our soldiers, our heroes, who probably often didn't want to be heroes, I'm sure, especially during the Second World War when soldiers were conscripted in, didn't have a choice. But still, you think of all of those young men and women who are now still fighting, still battling, still, you know, hopefully you hopefully trying to protect us. Hopefully it's not a political decision that people go to war, although we know often that it is. But hopefully they're fighting for good causes, and we want to honor them all. And and we want to remember, and we should remember. There are people who think, well, that was in the past, that was history, let's forget it. But it's not so much history. There are still people living today who, when my father, of course, is here with us now, and knows and remembers, but there are still people living on this earth who went through the torture and the torment and the terrible, terrible things that happened to them. I'm really glad that you're. Are you there, Chris?
Yeah, you're back.
Hello? Are you there? Oh,
Yes,
Phil.
you are back.
So, all right, let me come out and get back in.
Rosemary,
Let's
can you
see.
hear me?
Are you there,
All right.
Chris? Or did I
Everybody
lose
who's on the
you?
show, just
Or
stay tuned.
what's
I'm going to get
going
Rosemary back, all
on?
right?
Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. That was somebody calling me.
Okay, you're
Not
live still.
not realizing not realizing that I was doing the show this morning. Okay. So all right. So yeah, I'm so glad that uh was it this lady's daughter, or I'm not sure, somebody who was writing down his memoirs for him. Fantastic, because we need to remember. It's when we remember that we remember these things, and we remember the horrors, that we value, that we can truly value our freedom, and truly value what we have in those countries like America and like Great Britain. We can remember, that this freedom that we have, we shouldn't take it for granted. We shouldn't put slurs on it. We shouldn't get angry about things. We should be grateful every single day that we're not living under a regime of absolute terror. So this is to honor all of those soldiers. Okay, Chris.
So, it's been an interesting morning in the chat room here. We
Okay.
just had Shaquille join us from India saying hello, but
Hi.
people are not yet typing comments or questions in the chat.
Okay, what's going on?
Well, maybe you could just talk to your dad and hear what he has to say until
Well, I'm
people
going
are
actually,
commenting.
or okay then. Okay, right. I'm actually not going to talk about the soldiering part of it. My father was tough. He was an army man through and through. He was a professional soldier. He joined the army before, I think he was about 12 or 11 or 12. He lied about his age, and he joined a year before. It was, I think they were allowed when my dad was young, they were allowed into the army when they were 13, and I think he was sort of got in there, lied about his age, and by the time they actually found out about his age, he was old enough and they allowed him to stay in. And he was very, very proud of that. He was very, very proud that that he joined as soon as he could. He just wanted to, I guess, have a better life. He always wanted to be a soldier for whatever reason. He came from a very large family, and and he was the youngest, so he just wanted to get out and to see the world, and he certainly did that. He was in, let me see, where was he? He was in China, he was in India, he was in Germany, he flew over secret missions in Germany. What else he was in France, he was, you name it, and he had some part of it, and he was truly a warrior, and I'm looking at him laughing at me, and he still is truly a warrior. I think I take after him also in that, but he was in the home. uh he didn't really, he was, it was his parade ground. I mean, as kids, he would make us march around the he would, he would make us march around the garden, and we'd have left, and we were little kids. We were, whatever we were, 10, 11, something like that. My father actually, I was 11 years old when he finally came out of the army. He was retired out and hated every minute of his being away from the army, but so he would make us march around the garden. We'd left. I had a good home and I left. I had a good home and I left. I remember as kids, we'd have to do the marching bit and swing your arms and stand up straight. And so it was not easy because my parents hated each other for a start, so that wasn't easy. And my mother resented the fact that my father had come out of the army at all because it stopped her shenanigans. She had a few little boyfriends on the side. My upbringing was, let's say, it was different. It was different, and of course, then there were the beatings, the discipline, and all the rest of it. It was not easy, and my father, of course, as I've got older, I've realised, hid behind a mask and rarely, occasionally, but rarely showed us anything other than the army man, the soldier. He would polish his boots, he would polish his buttons, every night he would sit in his armchair polishing his buttons and all of that stuff. So he was a soldier through and through. Now, when I was 6 years old, now you better all be typing because this is going to be the last story I tell. We're going to shut this down unless you all participate, right? So I'm just giving you fair warning. So I'm telling you this story. So we were in Germany. My father had been posted to Germany. My mother had some health issues and was in the hospital. So she was out of the picture for most of the time that we were in Germany. We were there for nearly a year. I think she had some sort of surgery. Of course, nobody ever tells you what. And then she must have gone on some sort of, convalescent or something. Who knows? Because nobody ever spoke to you. I remember it was the very first Christmas we'd ever had without my mother, and it was amazing. But that's a whole other story. However, okay, now we are 4 girls, and I was second to youngest. And we all slept in one huge bedroom. There was a bed on each wall, and we would sort of, sleep in that same room. It was a very large house. We'd never experienced anything like this before. Great gardens, and I can remember the. It's funny. I was 6. But I can vividly remember a hedge of blue and pink hydrangeas. There was huge, huge bushes. There was a big hedge of blue and pink hydrangeas. Anyway, here we are. So we're all in this house together, and we're all being, we actually, unlike when we were with my mother, we would actually all sit down to breakfast at the table together. And you were not allowed to miss. We all sat down to breakfast together, and we probably sat down to dinner and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I'm getting off track. So this is the first time now, I'm telling you, when I caught a glimpse of my father the man rather than my father the soldier. There were only 3 times that this happened, only 3 in my life. Okay, so I woke up in the middle of the night and I lifted my head, and there was terrible, terrible storm, thunder and lightning, and it was literally shaking the house. And I lifted up my head, and none of my sisters were in the room. I had no idea where they were, but they'd all gone. So I found myself in the bedroom all by myself, and I can remember it was so scary. The thunderstorm was so terrifying, and I started to cry. The next thing I know, my father walks through the door, and I tried to stop crying. We were terrified of him, I have to tell you. I tried to stop crying because I thought he was going to, give me a good hiding. Anyway, he came in and he sat on the bed. This is the first time he'd ever done this, and he held my hands. And he started talking to me. Don't cry, don't be upset. It's only a thunderstorm. Now he said, your sisters are all downstairs and they're so scared and they're crying and they're trembling. But you're not scared, are you? And of course I was scared, but I'm shaking my head. No, of course I'm not scared. I did not know what was coming. I'd never heard my father's voice as gentle or as caring or as loving, and I was taken aback by it. I wasn't sure quite what was going on. So he talked to me about how the storms worked, and they, when they got really heavy with the rain, they bumped together and that made the thunder. And then he talked about the lightning, and he sort of talked to me about, and I was sort of became quite fascinated by what he was saying. And then he said to me, he said, I think you're brave enough that I can tell you this. He said, why don't we try counting between the thunder and the lightning? And we're going to count and see how, how far away the storm will get, because the longer we have to count, that means that the thunderstorm, that means the clouds are moving away and the thunder's going away and the storm is going away from us and we'll be fine. So we began to count, my father and I, and he taught me how to count between the thunder and the lightning, and then the next lot of thunder. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in the morning. So I must have, as we were counting, I must have fallen asleep. And woke up the next morning, all my sisters were back in bed and so on. And I remember I was 6, not quite, probably 6 years old. I remember very, very clearly seeing my father for the very first time. Of course, it didn't register then that I was seeing that his mask of soldier had dropped. But since that time, that is a memory that has literally stuck with me. And last night when I went to bed, the memory came to me. This morning, I woke up and the memory came to me. We forget, don't we? We see soldiers in uniform. We watch movies of war. We see all of these people going out there and doing battle for us. And we often forget that they are people first, with their own worries, with their own feelings, trying to keep them in place. We can't imagine how terrifying it must be for a soldier who is about to step onto the battlefield. Once you're in it, you're just doing it, aren't you? But prior to stepping onto that battlefield, we forget that our soldiers, our heroes, men and women alike, we forget that they are people first. And so I'm telling you this story because I always saw my father as a soldier, but this was the first time, and only ever twice since then did I see the mask fully come down. I caught glimpses from time to time, and sometimes when he was giving me pearls of wisdom, I would see the man behind the face, behind the uniform, behind the mask. But this was the very first time in my life that I ever was loved and cared for and held by that gentle man who always felt that even in his own home, he had to be the tough soldier battling through life. Okay, Chris, if nobody's written in the chat room, I think we're done. We're good. And it's okay because we're remembering, and that's fine. If nobody wants to join in, that's fine. But how are we doing?
We've got 4 or 5 comments waiting,
Okay.
Rosemary,
All right.
that I can read. We'll start with Randy. Randy said, speaking of your father, said he was practically a baby when he joined.
Of course, he was a baby. when I think about it, my grandson is 11 years old. Imagine, another year and he would, be billeted. He would be, he would be having to make his own bed and all the stuff that goes with it on the parade ground. I mean, goodness me, yeah, yeah. But he was my father was very proud of that fact. Okay, keep going.
Ornella says during the Second World War, a mother could lose 2 or 3 sons as a
Yeah.
soldier. How could a mother handle such a tragedy?
Well, it's amazing that I can't remember now what the movie is called. Private Ryan is the movie, I think. Okay, so I think in America, I'm not sure if they had this in England, or I know they had it in America because of the movie, but um, sometimes, when I think of my father's brothers, I can't remember now, 15, 16 of them. Yes, I know. I told you my father came from a huge family. But if you lost, if parents lost a son, because in those days the men were the soldiers, women stayed home and did other things. But I think if you lost your sons, they would then pull out the last son, and send them home, because the idea was that they would never leave a family without the one son who could carry on the name and so on. But devastating. I mean, this is you know what infuriates me so much when people talk about dictatorships, like ridiculous. Um, they don't think. They don't not thinking. When people talk about fascism and all of that stuff, and like it's nothing. It's an insult. The young lady who wrote about her father is an insult to those people who went through the Holocaust. It's an insult to those people who fought for us and fought for our freedom. And it's an insult to tell any of us that we don't have freedom, or we're not going to have freedom in the future. It is an insult to me. I find it extremely insulting, having had a father who was a professional soldier, risked life and limb every day when he was, out there on the front lines, or flying, being dropped into Germany or France or wherever to do such dangerous things. We should be so grateful, so very, very grateful, that I can sit here and say this to you, because had we been under another regime, they'd have come in and shot me. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. We have freedom of speech. We can talk to anyone in the world. We can say what we think, and nobody's going to come and arrest us or throw us in jail for our opinions. I mean, there are still countries in this world where they do that. There are still countries in this world where there is no freedom. There is no true freedom at all. And we should absolutely value the fact that I mean, look at us. Look at us as a society. We've accepted those people who have differing opinions than us. We've accepted, the gay community. We've accepted, the black community. Is there a black community that we intermingle? We are sort of multiracial, and I think that's an amazing, amazing thing. And yes, all right. So all of us suffered one way or another in our lives, in our childhoods, but we are still standing. We are survivors, and we're doing that together. And we have this amazing freedom to be able to say what we feel. And we have this amazing freedom, not just to say it in our own homes, but this amazing freedom where we can say this to every single person in the country. I think we have somebody from India tuning in today. When did we ever, and how many countries have that freedom when we should not take it lightly? We should thank our soldiers. We should thank our heroes, the nurses who tended us, the firemen who went and risked their lives to put out the fire. Look at 9/11. I mean, on and on it goes. We have so many heroes in our midst, quiet heroes, people who don't shout about what they did or how they did it. We have those silent heroes who even today are doing everything they can to support freedom and to support freedom of speech. Chris.
All right. This is from Anita. Anita says, my son was killed in a foreign operation.
Anita, I'm so very, very sorry for your loss. Um, I mean, what do we say? The loss of a child is the worst it can be. Um, Senseless loss, if there is such a thing as senseless loss, or it seems senseless to us. How do we live with that? How do we come to terms with that, to understand it? The only thing that I can say is believing in a life after death. I'm pretty certain your son survived death, but for you as a mother, my heart goes out to you. My heart goes out to you. I cannot, people come along and say, "Oh, we know how you feel." The worst thing to me, the worst thing anyone can say to someone who lost a child is, "Oh, give it time, you'll get over it." No, you do not. Never, ever, ever will you get over it. You hopefully will learn to live with it, but the pain and the heartache will remain. And, my heart goes out to you for this. And we celebrate your son. We honor and are grateful for his sacrifice, as we are for all of those men and women who have sacrificed themselves. And, it's hard to be proud when you see this, but I'm hoping that you are proud that he was brave enough to do whatever he needed to do, and the rest of us should pay homage to him, to you, because as his mother, I'm sure you brought him up beautifully. We should pay homage and we should be grateful. And so I personally would like to thank you and to thank your son for what he gave up. He gave his life for the rest of us, and we should not ever, ever take that lightly, ever. Chris.
This is from Barbara. Hi, Rosemary. My husband, Don, was a Green Beret in the Vietnam War and was a medic. His troop often lived with the villagers and even delivered 2 babies. But the Agent Orange sprayed in the jungles caused his blood cancer and he died 4 years ago. Does he still see himself as a soldier, or is that no longer part of his spirit? Please tell him I miss and love him so much.
Well, he can hear you better than I can, but I will say this to you. When we began this show, and I said good morning to Grey Eagle, who is right here beside me. Grey Eagle is a warrior, and let's face it, sometimes we don't even know what we're fighting for. Sometimes these young men and women get sent off here, there, and everywhere, and we can't even begin to suspect what the politicians have in mind behind the scenes for all of this. But my suspicion is, and Gregor is laughing and nodding at me, so I think your husband is still a warrior, but I think fighting for goodness and fighting for truth, not necessarily, with a gun, not necessarily in the jungle, not necessarily in the way that we consider warriors to be, because I think there are so many great warriors in this world who silently go about their work and their life, creating betterment for others, and sometimes having to fight for others to get truth or to get justice. So I think there are many ways that we can be. I'm truly a warrior. If I see injustice, I'm going to stand up for it. If I see meanness, that's me. I'm done. I'm coming at you. I'm truly a warrior, and we all have our, let's say, our breaking points, or we all have our the things that we dislike about life or other people. Um, every time you stand up for something you believe in, you're a warrior. Uh, I think we just have to learn, though, and as a warrior, I've learned uh, uh, the best warriors um, can be so kind and so gentle and respectful. So if you're going to tackle someone who's you think is being mean and so on, I always begin. This is how I begin when I see this going on. Excuse me, I'm pretty sure you've had a bad day, and it must be, you must find it very difficult sometimes to deal with your situation. Always start off kindly, and then, but please don't do that. Please don't say that. Please don't treat this child this way. It's just a little child. Of course, they sometimes still want to thump you in the face, but usually people are so shocked that they hopefully think about it. So a warrior doesn't have to be that aggressive guy or girl with a knife and a gun and all the rest of it. There are different ways to fight, but I think we should all fight for the things that we believe in. I'm sure your husband still does. Okay, Chris.
Chloe says, "Thank you, Rosemary. This helps me to understand my husband Simon, who was a soldier in England and can be fierce and challenging to live with."
Hi, darling. Well, I think it's only fair to tell people that I know and love Chloe, and I know Simon, and yeah, he can be a scary guy, but I think underneath all of that, I think so many people wear masks, but I think under all of that, he can be a bit squishy and a bit soft. But once you have been on the firing line, it's very, very hard to trust other people. It's very hard to let your guard down, and I'm glad that you're beginning to sort of uh, understand what's going on there, because he is a lovely guy. Right, Chris. Thanks, Chloe.
All right, Rhonda says, "Thank God for our freedom and all, the brave men and women that keep us free. My father and uncles all served. I'm so proud of them all and miss them."
Well, me too, and thank God. Yes, I mean, my father would say from time to time, there, but for the grace of God, we would be under a Hitler regime, and we know how that turned out. And any of us who didn't have blue eyes and blonde hair, oh well, what would we have been? Either dead or slaves or something, because he was all about the Aryan race, blonde hair, blue eyes. My brother would have been perfect for that. I can see him now laughing at me. But I have two brothers, so I've got one with dark hair and green eyes like me. None of the rest of my family, we only have two out of six kids, there's only two of us with green eyes. Not sure where that came from, but anyway. My others are either blue-eyed and blonde hair or brown-eyed and dark hair. Yes, well, there we are. Anyway, but yes, thank goodness that we have this freedom of speech. And I know that when I first went to Singapore, I've heard, and if you think I'm wrong, please correct me. I'd love to be wrong about this, but I was told when I first visited Singapore that Singapore has a benign dictatorship. In other words, they do it quietly. But I did have a little taste of it because I was, a celebrity when I was there, and I hate to say that word, but anyway, people knew what I did and so on, and people were very interested, and they wanted me to do a TV show and a radio show. However, uh, it was opted that I would do the radio show because I would do the interview, and then the powers that be would snip and tuck and cut the interview so that if they asked you a question and he gave an answer they didn't like, they could switch it and change it and so on. In the end, I actually had to refuse to do the interview because I refused to be censored in that way. We never think of the places who do that and places that have censorship, but trust me, all over the world there are countries that have censorship, and here we are in America and also in England. We don't always like what's going on, and we really wish sometimes that some people would be censored or, sort of not be allowed to carry knives and so on and so forth. Anyway, but nevertheless, for all that is wrong with it, the freedom to speak, the freedom that we have, the rights that we have here should not be taken lightly, absolutely should not be taken lightly. And we should value that above all else, because a lot of people died, put their lives at risk in order that we're able to do this. Chris, let's have. Do we have any other comments, or are we closing today? What's happening? I'm into a good book here. Just kidding.
Maggie has a funny story.
Go ahead.
All right. In World War I, my grandpa wanted to join the air combat, and in signing up, they handed him blueprints telling him he had to build his own biplane. He didn't join the air unit after that. Years later, I was going through a cabinet and I found the blueprints. He told me the story, saying he wasn't going to trust a plane he had to build. Later in his life, he was a fantastic woodsmith.
Oh, that's funny. That is funny. But he wouldn't fly his own plane that he built himself. That is a funny story. Thanks for that. Okay, keep going, Chris.
We have a couple of questions not specifically related to Veterans Day.
Okay, well, let's try them out and see.
Okay. G. Ravi says, "Hi, I would
Hi.
like to know whether we can call the ancestor's soul after the long period of passing, say 50 years ago. If the soul has taken the next birth, can we still be connected to them?"
Well, I like this question because it is interesting, isn't it? You'd think that people would move on, but here's the deal, okay? It's a bit like visiting. So if someone in the spirit world, let's say it's been 50 years, or even I have spoken to people in the spirit world who have passed. I remember a very good friend of mine wanting help with her, what is it, her family tree
Genealogy?
and the genealogy and the family tree and all the rest of it. And I ended up talking to people who had died, a couple of 100 years ago. It was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And through that, we were able to trace, her family tree, which turned out to be very, very accurate. But in doing that, it was quite astonishing. The things that we learned and the things that people in the spirit world were able to tell us. I think that some people in the spirit world, doesn't matter how long they've been gone. If they want to talk to us, they'll talk to us, and they'll find a way, because we don't disappear after 50 years. We continue on with our lives. We continue on with our journey. So if they have an inkling that somebody here would like to know more about them, very often they are willing to do it. Not always, though. Sometimes, no matter how hard you try. It's also the same if you passed a week ago or a month ago. If you don't want to talk to those people who you left behind, there's nothing I can do to get them to talk. I had this experience, gosh, years ago with a friend of mine. Her mother lost her husband. It's a long story, so I'm only going to to tell it briefly, but she came to see me. She was so excited. She wanted to talk to her husband, and for whatever reason, you can actually read it I tell the story in one of my books, but he absolutely, he gave his name, his rank, and his number, believe it or not, and that was it. I couldn't. Her mother came through, her father came through, everybody in the family came through to talk to us. He would not, absolutely would not say another word. And she went home to her daughter and she told her daughter, even though she'd had fabulous messages from all of her family, she told her daughter, well, that woman's no good at all. She doesn't know what she's doing, so on and so forth. However, the daughter had already booked an appointment with me, and she came a few weeks later to the appointment. And there he was, the man who wouldn't talk to his wife at all, except name, rank, number. And I was able to describe him. I could see him, but boy, then at some point, name, rank, and number, and he turned his back on me. He didn't leave, but he turned his back and he would not, absolutely not, answer any more questions or talk to me in any way. The reason he didn't leave was because he knew he was coming back, because his daughter had an appointment and he'd never met his daughter. She was born after he died in the war. And boy, I could not shut that man up. So it's a choice. It sounds weird, right? But it's a choice. Okay, Chris, keep going. But I love that question. Keep going.
Barbara's asking, is there a message for me from my Donald? Just hoping to hear from him today.
Blowing kisses right at you. Just saying. That. I've got Grey Eagle and I've got your husband next to him, and it's just blowing kisses here. Okay, keep going, Chris.
Well, there aren't any more questions in there, Rosemary, but I've got a quick question.
Oh, okay. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
So,
no. What?
So as you well know, my husband was in the military. My father was in the military. I have a number of siblings who are in the military, a number of in-law siblings in the military. And so now they've passed, and now they can look back in their lives and they can see the situation of the world.
You just hold on a minute. You just want a message for Mike, who's come standing right here listening to all of this. But go ahead. I can see where you're coming from. Go ahead. You know, there are all those people listening who are saying, how come Chris gets an opportunity and we don't? But keep going with your question.
Well, if there was a question in the, I would have read their question. Do they now look back on those situations of having to do the soldiering and compare it to, let's just say, the ideal of the world where we wouldn't have any wars? Like, what are their thoughts between the life they had to live and what we think would be the ideal situation here, like regrets or hope, or what are they feeling?
Again, we mentioned in the last question, it's a question of choice. It's a question of choice whether when someone's in the spirit world, whether they want to talk to us or whether they don't want to talk to us. And different people, just like here and just like they were in life, people have different ideas, different views, different viewpoints. I'll give you the message from my father, who was conscripted. Well, actually, he volunteered, but my brother was, I should say, my brother was conscripted. In other words, my brother didn't have a choice. When the war's on, all the young men are called up, and nowadays all the young women also. I mean, we don't have choices. So, but my father, let me give you his words. I don't regret a thing about putting on the uniform. I don't regret the soldier that I am and was, obviously. The killing is part of life. I regret the bloodshed, but this world is made for war. Some wars are bloody. Some wars are fought gently. Some wars are fought cleanly. But all wars are fought unfairly, which is the regret. Those who create the wars, he says unfairly, those who create the wars have their agendas, and the soldiers follow where they must. Mike is saying, again, no regrets. But each person has their own viewpoint, and each person has their own way of looking at things. So there is no clear cut answer, Chris, to anything that you've just asked. Because you might ask one person, do you regret? And they'd say yes, and somebody else would say no. Or people have their own different points of view. We don't all become, when we pass into the spirit world, we're not all saints. Mike is laughing. Definitely not. We are not all saints. We don't become sainted. We still have our wants, our needs, our hopes, our wishes, our dreams. So that's as much as I can answer that. Okay. If there is no
You've got a
more.
few more that came in, Rosemary.
Oh, look at this. See, you just got in there, right? I was just about to quit. All right. I've got a book to read. Come on. No, go ahead.
All right, this one's from Gary.
Okay.
I would like to show my respect for my past father-in-law. He lied to enlist and was wounded in hand-to-hand combat in the Battle of Saipan. He
Wow.
passed this year at 100.
Wow, Gary, that's an amazing story. And you see, and he lived to be 100. Hand-to-hand combat. I mean, gosh, when you think about it, if you think about it, you can hear swords clashing, you can hear men being cut to ribbons, you can hear the screams and so on. These are the horrors and the terrors of war that men went through in order to give us the freedom that we have today, that we should never take lightly, and we should never disparage that freedom. As I say, we all witnessed, all around the world, we just witnessed a war between, the Democrats and the Republicans, and what a war it was, and what a dirty war it turned out to be, in my opinion, because as my father says, she's reminding me, no war is fought cleanly. However, the fact that we could have that war, that we all of us had our say, the fact that we could stand up and not be taken to prison or not be shot on sight or whatever, the fact that we have freedom in this country is, let's not forget that. Let's not forget that whether we like it or whether we don't, the majority has their say, the majority wins. In 4 years' time, it might be a different kind of majority, but the majority wins. And this is what our men and women have fought for in order to give this to us. And we should never, ever, ever take that lightly, ever. So we should be proud of all of them. And Gary, you should be proud of your grandfather. Amazing. Chris.
Last one from Barbara.
Okay.
I must tell you about my dad. He fought in World War II, serving in the Navy on a submarine. He lied about his birth date and joined at 15 years old. He was always very proud of his service. Tell him I still miss him and thank you for this show today. And
Bob,
Gary
Bob,
finished Rosemary with
well,
he
hold
was
on. Let me just answer Barbara. Barbara, I'm not going to tell him anything. He hears you so clearly. You don't need me for that. But I applaud what you're saying. And Gary, go ahead.
Gary finished up with he was bayoneted and found in the mud. Spike received his Purple Heart just before he passed.
Wow. He had to wait that long to receive his Purple Heart. Okay. All right. But thank goodness he was still alive to see it and appreciate it. I think that all of those soldiers deserve a medal of some kind. And my father's chest was filled with medals. But I think they need the Medal of Honor for doing the things that they often were forced into doing or had no choice about doing. And we still have, in America, we still have soldiers at war. And nothing about war is clean, nothing about war is fine. And whenever we can, we should stop those wars. We want peace in this world of ours. But while ever there are people inciting or have their own agenda, you know, it's up to us as individuals to say no more. But in the meantime, because we are only, you know, one small voice, um, but if we became many, many voices, um, we wouldn't have those wars. But in the meantime, my my brother is here, a soldier and a mercenary, fought for his country, fought for king and country, queen and country, whatever that was, queen, I think, and country. Yeah, Victoria, I'm thinking, and then Elizabeth and so on. Anyway, so my father is here. Mike is here honoring, they are all honoring and supportive of and supporting all of those. Do you think about this? Millions of people who died in order to give us what we have now. So we honor them. This show is about honoring them. We thank them. We can't thank them enough. The way that we can thank them is to encourage freedom of speech. The way that we can thank them is to show respect to each other. The way that we can thank them is to honor their memories, which I certainly do with my brother and my daddy, and I know, Chris, you honor Mike's memory also. They're blowing lots of kisses at us, so that's good. All right, that's it. So on Thursday, we will have our Thursday morning show. Um, Maybe I'll tell another story about my daddy. The very first time I can ever remember him sitting me on his knee. It's a sad story, but it's a great story. Anyway, that's that. All right. So for now, until I see you again, please, everyone. Are we doing a? Are we doing a? We're not doing a show this week, are we? For a tutorial. Are we doing a tutorial? We have.
Well, you always have your opportunity to add whatever you like, but right now we just have scheduled Thursday at 11 a.m.
Well, we'll be having a tutorial hopefully next week. If you've got any ideas what it is that you'd like to learn about or know more about, then, you know, but we have ideas as well. But please email us, rosemary@rosemaryantaltea.com, put in the subject line what it is that you would like for us to, what you might like to learn. Remember, I'm reminding you that on the
14th of December?
14th of December, thank you. The 14th of December, we are having Grey Eagle Speaks. Tickets are limited, so if you want a ticket, you need to apply. We've tried to make it as affordable as we can for people. It's a 3-hour and we'll be giving messages, we'll be taking questions, and Grey Eagle, hopefully, we can't guarantee it, but I'm pretty sure he's laughing at me that he's going to be speaking to us, which is always an amazing event. If you've been before, you know what an amazing event it is. But we'll be giving messages to people as well, so you might want to write in and book in your question nice and early. That is the 14th of December. So that's our Christmas special this year. Okay, so until I see you all again, thank you for joining me this morning. Thank you all for your participation. We're sorry if there were glitches today. We know there were. So until I see you again, please have a very, very blessed rest of the day, everybody, and have a very blessed rest of the week. Bye-bye.